Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and welcome to a new series I'm doing on my channel this year called, what are we calling it? I forget. Called Second Time's the Charm. So I am going to be doing these vlogs every other month, most likely, and I am going to be retrying books that I've either DNF'd in the past or have not enjoyed. For the first installment, I will be bringing you along as I try to read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey? Kesey? How do you pronounce his name? I've never looked it up, but I think we've all heard of this book. I tried to read this in high school and I DNF'd it, and I think I made it like one chapter in. First chapter doesn't even look long either. I have no idea why I DNF'd it. I barely remember reading it. I do remember picking it up. I remember reading a few pages. I think it was the first chapter. I don't remember my exact thoughts, but it was something to do with like being baffled as to why this was famous. I didn't really give it a chance. So we're going to read this. We're going to see whether or not this book is indeed a book that's not for me. Maybe I just didn't gel with the writing style, or maybe I was just too young to appreciate it. I don't know. So we're going to read this and I will check back when I've made some progress. So I just read the first chapter, so I'm as far as I've ever been, and it's a very compelling start. We're at I don't know what the correct term would be nowadays, but I think like at the time you would have called this, in the most politically correct way, you would have called it a mental institution. I think they were much more colorful, more derogatory words at the time. You're introduced to the narrator and to Nurse Ratched. You're not introduced to McMurphy, that's the other main character, but he is mentioned. I think McMurphy is the Jack Nicholson character in the movie. I haven't watched the movie either, but I think he's the Jack Nicholson character. So it's a very compelling start, quite a emotionally charged start, but I definitely can see why I would have DNF'd this in high school, because the narrator obviously is going to be an unreliable narrator. It seems he's having like maybe hallucinations, or maybe not hallucinations, but he has some paranoia or some delusions, it seems. But also, I'm sure a lot of his paranoia is warranted, because I know that Nurse Ratched is like a villain, not a nice character to say the least. So I think at the time when I would have been reading this in high school, I think the first chapter probably just confused me, because he is having this delusion. They're trying to shave him, and basically he has an outburst. He thinks they're trying to put machinery in him. So I think as a teenager, I probably found it just too confusing what was really happening and what wasn't really happening. And yeah, I think it just went over my head a bit, maybe. But I think now at 37, I'll be able to appreciate this better. So I've read a good chunk of this now, like 60 pages. The narrator, who is half Native American, is called Bromden. They call him Chief. They think he's deaf and mute, but he hears everything, and he pays very close attention to everything that's happening in the psychiatric hospital. Partly he's delusional. He thinks that Nurse Ratched and the orderlies, that they install machinery in people, that Nurse Ratched has this whole system, he calls it the Combine, where she is controlling people through this machinery and controlling them so that she can set them out in the world and still have control over them even after they've been released. Because she obviously has control of everybody while they're at the hospital. So he's obviously paranoid and delusional. However, he's also very astute in his observations, even though he doesn't really see reality exactly. He sees her manipulation and her control in ways that other people don't. But now a new patient has come, McMurphy, and he's very boastful, very charming. I don't know if charming's the right word. Very gregarious. And Nurse Ratched, she's pegged him as a potential troublemaker and someone who's going to try to quote unquote take over. And he is. He's sizing her up, and he sees through her BS as well, that he's also kind of onto her control and manipulation. I'm not going to give spoilers during this vlog, but I am going to predict something now because they've foreshadowed the use of, like, the overuse of things to control patients, like medications, and also the use of shock therapy. And our narrator, Bromden, but he thinks back to some of the patients who used to be more or less okay, but then were basically turned into chronic, like, patients because of shock therapy or because of lobotomy and that kind of thing. All because of Nurse Ratched, presumably, because if you are hard to control, she's going to find a way to control you. And I just feel like, okay, we've got this new character who, it almost seems like he might not even really be mentally ill. He might be faking it so that he gets to stay in this institution instead of this, like, labor camp where he was finishing out, like, a criminal sentence, essentially. And maybe he's decided to fake this because he thinks this will be a cushier sentence than the farm camp where he was doing hard labor. So to me, this is just setting up him as someone who is not insane, become chronically mentally ill because of either overmedication or shock therapy or lobotomy or something drastic. McMurphy knows that he's messed up. He's just realized that being committed to a psychiatric ward was a mistake, because again, he is not insane. As much as he didn't want to be on the, like, work farm, didn't want to complete that sentence. It was like a 6-month sentence that he was 2 or 3 months into, whereas getting himself committed means the sentence is indefinite. Nurse Ratched can keep him there as long as she deems necessary. He has no say when he can leave. I finished the book. I'm not going to give any big spoilers, but there were some things that I saw coming, but there was actually quite a lot that happens at the end of this book that I just didn't anticipate happening. Another thing that is quite striking, to me at least, is the compassion that shines through this novel. So I imagine that there's a lot in this book that is outdated concerning mental illness and just our attitudes around different, like, psychiatric disorders and that kind of thing. But for something written in the early 60s, it never felt like it was belittling or looking down on or condescending to people with mental illness. And yeah, just the way it was written with a lot of what I felt was a lot of compassion for the characters, and I think more broadly to people, real life people who struggle with mental illness. Now, being written in the early 60s by a male author, the depiction of women is not great in this book. It's one of my very few gripes about it. So it's not like it was a huge shock to me or anything, but yeah, there were no really good female characters. There aren't a whole lot of women in this book. There are a couple of side characters plus Nurse Ratched, and there were just some things that had happened concerning the female characters that seemed kind of unnecessary or gratuitous or that kind of thing. So yeah, the depiction of women, not great. Everything else I thought was really good. I really liked the writing. I really liked being in Chief Bromden's head. It was such a just really compelling viewpoint. This person who, because everyone thinks he's deaf, he gets to hear all the secrets in the hospital. They have him like clean, they call him Broom sometimes. Hey, Broom Bromden, because he's always like sweeping up and cleaning up. So they just hand him brooms and have him do stuff. But then he's like cleaning out the staff room while they're having staff meetings. Like, he's privy to all of this information. People just say stuff in front of him. And so he knows all of this stuff, but at the same time, he also like hallucinates, and he goes in and out of this like fog a lot. So it was just he was a really interesting character through whom we see the story unfold. So yeah, I thought the character work in this was really great. I am so glad that I read it and I didn't just discount it because teenager Melissa didn't like the first chapter. So yeah, those are my like overall thoughts on this book. If you've read the book, I'd love to have a chat in the comments. Let me know what you thought of it. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.